and welcome to the Writers and Illustrators of the Future podcast. This is John Goodwin, your host. This podcast is dedicated to the aspiring writer and artist and will provide inspiration and tips from top professionals in the field. If you've been listening to this podcast or are new to it, I thank you very much. I would also appreciate if you took a moment to follow it on whatever platform you use to listen to your podcasts. Writers of the Future is one of the longest running writing competitions in the world, now celebrating 4 decades of providing a helping hand as initially conceived by Owen Hubbard. I also want to let you know that the Writers of the Future volumes are available in bookstores throughout the US, Canada, the UK, South Africa, and Australia, as well as through all major online retailers. So I'm today at the conclusion of the Writers of the Future workshop week. We had our awards gala last night. I've been interviewing winners throughout the day. And right now I'm here with Eric Schleicher, who is one of our winning writer. And we're going to talk about his journey, his story. We're going to test his elevator pitch that he just learned a few hours ago about his story, how to describe his story. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you for having me here. This is an absolutely surreal experience for me as a longtime fan of this podcast.
Well, I'm very happy to have you on here, and especially happy that you're a winner. So I guess to begin with, what's your journey like in terms of becoming a writer and then leading up to winning this contest?
So I came late to the craft. I'm 41 years old, and 9 years ago is when I started seriously writing. So I was at a time I was just finishing up graduate school. I did a dual degree in law school, law degree, as well as a master's degree. And my son was born during my last semester of school. And so as I graduated, I was looking at the prospect of taking a bar with a newborn son, and I wanted a break. I wanted to be a family man for a little bit and take the bar a little bit later. My wife had an e-commerce business, and so that gave me the opportunity to take some time off and be close with my wife and son. And so at the time, I was reading On Writing by Stephen King, one of my favorite authors, and was so inspired to take up the craft, and fell in love with the craft. And I did not want to become an attorney. Once I fell in love with the craft, little did I know it'd take me so long to finally get published. And I'm glad I didn't know how long that would take, because I kept at it, kept improving. And so in 2019, at a local con, I ran into the previous coordinating judge, Dave Farland. He was the guest of honor at Miss Con. That's where I found out about the Writers of the Future contest, and he extolled the benefits. Said that every aspiring pro needs to submit to this contest, and also he suggested the benefits of the short story form as to improve the craft. And so that was I guess now 5 years ago. But once I found out about this contest, I threw myself into the short story form, threw myself into all the resources that the Writers of the Future contest provides aspiring pros. And I submitted every single quarter since then. And so it was my
how many?
So this is my 14th submission is when I finally won. And I traveled the ranks. So the first 3 submissions where I didn't place were rejections, and then I got an honorable mention. Started getting honorable mentions on the regular, and then silver honorable mention, and then finally I won the contest with Squiddy.
That's an amazing story. Squiddy is a very interesting story.
Yes.
And your story about Squiddy is very interesting as well. How I want to talk about self-rejection is one of the worst problems that an author can get into. So if I remember correctly, you had some issues with this story and not believing in it, or you had something about it that was it was an earlier story idea, or it was an earlier story that you'd written and then you needed to make your deadline. So tell me about that, because some people really get into self-rejection And that's half the battle right there is overcoming that.
It is. And so rejection in general with as a writer, that's a rite of passage. You are going to get rejected. But you have to submit to get rejected. You have to submit your stories. And it's hard as an artist when you put a bit of your soul into your art when somebody says no, we're not going to take this story. It doesn't mean it's not a good story. There are a plethora of reasons why they're saying no. It could be a great story, and they've already published a story very similar in the past.
Yep.
But it's so I had to work on changing your relationship with rejection. So every single year, I set rejection goals. In fact, I try to get rejected because that means that I am submitting my work, and I'm getting it out there. And sooner or later, you're going to hear that yes, and you're going to find that right editor. You're going to find that the home for your story. As far as Squiddy goes, so I wrote it, and it was a silver honorable mention was the first time, the first result from this contest. Every single quarter, I always submit to my best story to Writers of the Future. There's not a better short story market than Writers of the Future, for the benefits that if you do get published by this contest, if you do get into this anthology, that is absolutely so lovely. But so then the next quarter, I wrote another story, and it was a pretty dang good story. And so that was going to be my Writers of the Future story. But it was a couple of months before the deadline. And so I decided I had a couple of months. I'm going to submit that story to another market. It was magazine, fantasy, science fiction, and I've gotten a lot of rejections from magazine, fantasy, and science fiction. I kind of assumed that it would be a very quick turnaround, just a form rejection. As it turns out, that story was held, and a month went by, and they still had it. Then 2 months come by, and we're getting really close to deadline. I've written a couple of other stories in the time, in the interim, but as far as my own judgment, it didn't match the quality of the story that was out at market. So it's kind of in this weird position where it's like I just wanted a result, not necessarily a rejection, but being that Writers of the Future is my top market, I wanted to submit it here. And so I believe it was 2 or 3 days before the deadline, I didn't have a story that I thought that would win this contest. And so I was like, well, there's still Squiddy. It's a good story. It needs a little bit of work. Why don't I take a look at it? And so I revised it, and tweaked it a little bit, changed the ending. The ending didn't quite land properly. There's some sentences that are a little bit clunky, and I sent it off. And lo and behold, that was the winner. Yeah.
So yeah, that's again, I brought that up as the perils of self-rejection. Your job is to write, not to reject. And as you get better, ostensibly you get fewer rejects, but that's not even true. Dean, I think, with one of the magazines that his wife sells to all the time, he's yet to be able to sell a story to them. I mean, he's written hundreds and hundreds of stories. Kevin Anderson prides himself on being the most rejected author. He even had at the beginning of his career. I don't know that I'm saying exactly what the plaque said on his trophy. The author who should quit, or the author who has no future. Something that's just really like, really, that he got from a conference he went to. And for him, it was just, okay, bring it on, let's keep on going. And he used to keep an urn with all the rejection slips in it. And at one point, many, many years ago, he said, I'm up to 675 or whatever, some huge number of rejection slips. But you got to get over that. Like you said, it doesn't mean that it's not a good story. It could be several other things. It could also be because it's not a good story. Right. I don't want to give you false sense of like, well, this is really good. It was just a bum rap. It might be just, that wasn't a good story. But on Squiddy, I mean, that was was bizarre, but it was also science fiction and fantasy can take something that's happening, and if you move it into another universe, another world, another time, another situation, another scenario, and lay out these things here, you can kind of look at them and go like, wow, that's disgusting, that's awful, that's terrible. So you don't have to look at what's happening right now when you just walk down a boulevard and see the derelicts strung out on whatever and what's happening. So maybe that's my interpretation. But anyway, so tell me a bit about that, how you came up with that story idea and doing this thing, if there was any particular inspiration behind it.
The creative process for me is a very mystical thing. What was Squiddy for me as the writer? What I was exploring is despair and our relationship with despair and addiction, and how we often seek to soften despair or escape it altogether via different addictions. Whether that could be drugs or it could be your phone, perhaps, and you're not doing what you want to do. But the point that I want to get at is that through resilience, and that's the important part, through resilience, you can find hope. And that's what I hope to achieve there. And I put a very big speculative element behind it. And but the genesis of that, I mean, so the squids in Squiddy, squids in Squiddy are aliens, and they're parasitic, and people become addicted to them. And so when I first came up with the story, I wanted to write about addiction. And I found recently, my family, we've recently downsized, and so we were moving. I found this note card, and actually found the genesis of how Squiddy came to be. And at the time, it was I wanted to have an alien that was addictive, and it was like a worm at that time. And so as I began writing the story, it became squids, because squids are just really very cool. The cephalopods are just an awesome animal family, and with the bioluminescence and the communication, it's just it's a very vibrant and vivid animal that I thought they could pull the reader in.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just where the story went. And
it's an awesome story. Yes. All right, and we just had 4 more winners join us. So starting with Kal, please say your name and your story.
My name is Kal M. I wrote Butterside Down, which is about a man who falls in love with a toaster and then gets accused of conspiring for genocide.
Yeah, that's just kind of like another day.
Hi, my name is Galen Westlake. I'm the author of The Imagilisk, which is a story about an octogenarian whose dementia lands him in a nursing home, but he discovers or rediscovers his imaginary friends and realizes he's now on a quest to save them.
Awesome.
I'm James Davies, the author of Ashes to Ashes, Blood to Carbon Fiber, story about a man who has accidentally destroyed the planet and has decided to do anything he can to create a seed of hope.
I accidentally destroyed a planet, and can I buy you a cup of coffee?
My name is Amir Agoora. I'm the author of Dakota, about a young Native American boy who's taken captive by Teddy Roosevelt to kill a Wendigo in a newly nationalized park. But the boy decides he's going to kill Roosevelt instead.
Whoa. All right. So I'm always amazed at the constant new take on storylines, that how they think that, where'd they come up with that idea? So now with Kal, so on your story, how'd you come up what was the basis of that? Was there a lot of research that went into it first, or are you just kind of like, I dreamed?
Okay, well, to be honest, my toaster fell off the shelf and scared me. And for a genuine second, I really believed that the toaster did it on purpose. After that, I realized that that was not smart, but but it did give me an idea for a story.
I mean, it's an amazing story, and it actually works, obviously, because you won, but it works as this concept, and you see it more and more now as, especially with the whole subject of AI, which with some of the way that science fiction authors will imagine and postulate a future with computers, and what your toaster friend actually did prior to just being the toaster that, the guy that found him got to make it his best friend. It's scary stuff, what AI and that level of generative, I guess it's generative because it's gotten to the point now working from what you've said here, like it can create and move into different areas and conceive and considers itself to be, or his friendlies considers him to be a person because he, like I said, falls in love with his toaster. All right, so I proofread everything. I really had a lot of fun with that story. That was it was so quirky, which made it just really fun to really read. So that was great. Well done to you on that.
It's such a fun story. I got to say, after reading that story, I've been much nicer to my toaster oven.
Kane, what about your story?
Well, the question of where ideas come from is something that's always kind of fascinated me, and often you just don't know. But I think in my case, I wrote it when I came down with COVID, and I think it was just a feverish haze. So I'm really not sure, but I think that's what brought it on.
What was interesting to me is there's a movie coming out too called Ifs.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Because If is imaginary friend, and so they had these people there, and it was way cool. It was just it was a very fun, uplifting story, and how people and that's one thing that's really common about usually with Rise of the Future, but in your story, what could normally be conceived of, like where you're put in some type of a home, and there you're out of sight, out of mind. The family says, okay,
yes,
you've earned this place, and so there you go, and just you got money, they'll take care of you, and I've done my due diligence, sayonara. And then these guys just get together and they rediscover their childhood and want to protect, and
life begins at 80.
Evidently, in your story, that definitely does. And it was just really fun and uplifting. You just can imagine these old guys just scooting around. And there was this old movie, The Over the Hill Gang, with Walter Brennan and several other people. And these are these old guys. They used to be famous gunslingers and lawmen and stuff like that, but they're old, so they don't have the speed, they don't have the eyesight, that stuff is gone. But you have this gang coming into this town and this stirring it up and causing all types of problems. So they had this signal that would send, Brazos. And so they got the thing Brazos, and they all that, okay, good. And they went to help their friend in this town that needed help. And out of guile and intrigue and trickery, they were able to beat these other bad guys.
There's something to be said for experience.
Exactly.
Root for
sure.
the old guys.
Exactly. All right. So now your story.
So I started entering the contest about 12 years ago. Only recently, 2 years ago, decided I actually had to win. I had to try, not just write, but learn and everything. And I studied one of the previous volumes and made a spreadsheet and reduced all this beautiful art down to ugly, logical, rational numbers. And I decided I was going to paint by numbers with writing. And I went to sleep, and I had the most vivid, surreal dream that was a fully formed story with character, flaw, plot, everything. No painting by numbers required. And I woke up and I wrote it down.
And that's what you won with.
And that's what I won with.
So give me your story description there.
So Rickard invents a machine called a fabricator. You put in living matter and it can print anything, even other living matter of an equal mass. And the rich get their hands on it and become the ultra rich and happen to consume the entire planet, leaving everyone else with almost nothing and stuck using their limbs as currency. And so the inciting incident occurs and Rickard decides enough's enough. He has to do something to undo his wrong.
That's a very chilling story. It's got a definite good ending for everybody. Actually, even for him too. It's a good ending because
I believe so.
Yeah, I do agree with that. He's atoned for his sin, and he's made for a better world as a result of what he's done. That's really good. And now, Mr. Dakota.
Dakota. This one, I usually never remember where stories come from, but this one I do. I was supposed to be writing another script for my job, and it wasn't working very well. So I was just noodling around with sentences, and I got the main sentence for the story, where the title comes from, Dakota. Had this narrator's voice and nothing else. And but I liked the sentence a lot. It was like 4 sentences I was proud of. So I send it to my girlfriend and I go, I saw this in the New Yorker. What do you think about this sentence? I kind of like it. And she goes, it's all right, but it's a little pretentious. I was like, no. Because writers are so fragile. We don't want them to say anything. If I told her I wrote it, she would say, oh, it's perfect. You're amazing. So I couldn't do that. But then I love the sentence so much. I came back to it a week later and I wrote a story around it. And I was reading a book about Teddy Roosevelt. And so that all came together for the story. And I was really happy with it.
Yeah, this is in Connecticut, Carlisle Indian Boarding School, 1905. I am awoken with broken English. The break is palliative. It means I'm among my people. Leaning over my cot is Mongwao. He is 13 winters like me, but we share no tongue, other than this broken one we are compelled to share. It's alternate history.
Yeah.
And fascinating story. And so, I mean, every one of these I can go on easily an hour talking about your stories and how my take on why the judges, because I have no idea who's going to win until I get sent the stories, and then, okay, proofread. And that's when I've read the stories. So with this past week, I'm just curious, what was some of the highlights of the past week that you've experienced? Starting with you, Kal.
I'm just excited to meet other people who like to write, honestly. It's very isolating sometimes when you feel like you are the only person in this world of, I guess, creating. But being in the same room as people who are far more skilled than me is both humbling and exciting at the same time.
So you just got 4 people disagreed with you there on, but for at least on one particular part of your statement there, but I can understand because everybody will say the same thing. So you kind of like, they zero each other out. What about yourself?
Oh, well, there were many high points, so it's hard to pick just one, but if I had to, I guess I'd probably go with the art reveal. That's a big moment for any author to see another artist create something from something they've created at such high caliber. The artists and the illustrators were just amazing.
Yeah.
There were a lot of tears. Not me, of course, but from the softies.
Good. And then for yourself, John, Eric.
So I'll have the second Galen regarding the art reveal. So Tyler Vale was my illustrator. I found out that I was a winner in Q1, so I had a full year of anticipation and speculation of what the illustration was going to be. I'm glad that Tyler Vale decided what was going to be, because it was just absolutely phenomenal, and he is the Golden Brush Award winner, and deservingly so, because he is incredibly talented, and what he illustrated is just absolutely achingly, hauntingly stunning.
It actually is. He was. I mean, it's hard. Like a parent, what's your favorite story? Your favorite artist? I'm not going to get suckered into that question because they're all unique. And even though I have different styles that I like of story, it's evolved for me over the course of this podcast, because I interview authors. So in order to interview an author, I have to read a book. So I'm reading a book a week pretty much before I we'll do the interview. And so I'm all over the spectrum on what kind of stuff that I read. So when I read your stories, it's like, wow, I start off and the only thing it sometimes has to do is I have to like switch gears mentally from, I've just read a hard sci-fi, then I go to near future military. Now I'm going to this fantasy over here. Now I got AI uploading. And so sometimes it takes me a page or two to like switch gears and get into that story. But otherwise, once I'm into it, it's like, that's, just so cool. Okay, so your story. What you like, the story about the week.
Yeah. So a couple of things come to mind. The legend Larry Niven handed me my trophy, which is just incomprehensible. But rivaling that was the art reveal, and May's illustration brought my dead planet to life far more than it ever deserved to be. It was just incredible. And beyond that, weaving between every moment of this week has been bonding with the other winners. It's been incredible, and I'm really proud to have gone through this beside them.
That's great. And then yourself, Amir?
Picking off his last thing he said, the other winners was the highlight. I expected them to be great writers. That comes with the territory, but they were so incredibly nice, especially the people sitting here with me, supporting me. It's true. You owe me $5, all of you.
Checks in the mail.
No, but it's true. They're super kind and willing to help you, and that made me feel right at home. The art, Connor Chamberlain did my art, and I did tear up. I'm not gonna lie. Beautiful work. It's haunting. It's everything. It's not what I wanted. It's better. He elevated everything. So all praise to him. And lastly, if I'm not rambling too much, I love taking the limo. I've never been in a limo before, and they really deck you out going to the event in your nice suit. So I have nothing but great things to say about the competition. I hope anybody who wants to go applies.
Good. So you had a whole bunch of instructors here, and I'm not asking you who's your favorite, but yeah, because one of the things that happens is people realize this is the way we write our book, there isn't anything like that at all. You've got so much to pick and choose from. It's a full, spectrum of storytelling that you can do. So, how was that come, because when you did the online writing workshop, which everybody did, and that we had Tim Powers, Orson Scott Card, and Dave Farland who did that, and we followed. This is the basic workshop that was originally created by the Aldous Budrus when we had our first workshop in Taos, New Mexico. It's now evolved by having all of our other judges coming in and giving their hard-won knowledge on stuff. So what was that like, being able to get even discrepant messages, do this, no, do this, and they're not the same thing. It's like, red, no, green. How was that for you? What was that like, getting all this stuff? What was your take home on that?
So I actually thought the disagreements greatly enhanced the lessons. Those disagreements led to discussions, and I don't know, information that wouldn't have come out through a structured lesson came out in greater detail. I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, this is one of the things that makes it totally different than just going to a workshop, is you get all these people, they each have their own things there, but just getting Tim Powers, who extols the virtues of traditional publishing, and then Ian Wesley Smith. I'm warning you, it's self-publishing. That's the future. So what about yourself, Cal?
Orson Scott Card complained about the present tense for 15 minutes, and I think I just realized why all my manuscripts have been rejected. I always write in present tense. I really need to stop doing that.
Yeah, it's he's brilliant. When you just like Orson Scott Card. I mean, I love his writing. He is such an amazingly nice man, and he's so willing to just impart all the knowledge he has. But he's a stickler for grammar and knowing English.
Yeah, they say to take all the advice with a pinch of salt, but if he says to do something, I'm going to do it, I think.
Yeah. Every now and then you'll find stuff that writing first person, you'll see a story in here. Like when I think it was Lance, there's always, never write a story where they're waking up. But his story there, they land on the planet and he's waking up and so.
But with 100 people missing.
There you go. That's true. That's true. But still, it's so it just shows that with enough creativity, you can create, what you want on that. We had in this volume here, I think there's 8 first-person stories. For years, we were, the winners were told, don't write first person, write, omniscient third or something like that. And then 8 of the stories here are first person. I don't know if it's because of coming out of the pandemic, that it's much more personal when you have first person, obviously. But I asked Jody about it, says, I just do a big selection and then that's what I send on to the judges. This is what they chose. So it was like, there is an evolution happening in science fiction and fantasy. And the thing you're going to come to realize is like what you write is going to set the stage for science fiction and fantasy half a dozen years down the road. Everything that became, the uploading the consciousness, you're reading that half a dozen to 10 years before in Rise of the Future. Steampunk before became a big genre. All these things that you see that a lot of the major trends were being written by you all, half a dozen years before when it had a chance to bubble up and become, the genre, the new science fiction and fantasy. Roughly 64% of the winners go on to professional careers, in art and science fiction writing. So is there anything that happened throughout the week where you reevaluate how you're writing or what your future was going to be in becoming an author?
Absolutely. Dean Wesley Smith broke down the numbers, and he pointed out that with self-publishing, a novel can be 50,000 words. And if you write 4 novels a year, that's only 200,000 words, which sounds like a lot, but it breaks down to basically 5 hours a week. And unless you're Elon Musk, you can probably eke out those 5 hours. And that means you can publish 4 novels a year through concerted, focused effort. And that's completely spun my 4 short stories a year ethos on its head.
Good. I mean, that's the whole thing of self-publishing. Now, how many of you are looking to do the traditional publishing, and how many are looking at doing the going indie or self-publishing?
I'm definitely going to do traditional. I'm bad at promoting myself. I don't like it at all. When Tim Powers was talking, the whole time I was thinking, yes, that's so right. Yes. Oh, you're a genius. Yes. So yeah, I'm going to try traditional as much as I can because that sounds so much nicer.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
Right. So I am also aiming for traditional publishing. That's one strategy, right? And my aim is to get as many readers to my stories, and I'll have flexible thinking regarding that. But as I see it right now, that's where I'm pointing my my vehicle, so to speak.
Pointing your typewriter. So, how about you, Galen?
Let's see where fate takes us. They both sound like wonderful opportunities.
Good. And have you had any thoughts of that? Any particular druthers?
I think I'll go with traditional, but to be honest, like Amir said, when Tim Powers was talking, I was like, yes, genius. When Dean Wesley Smith spoke, I was like, yes, genius. So I don't know.
Okay. On the science fiction is the herald of possibility. And that's was in the introduction to Battlefield Earth by Owen Hubbard. And one of the things, when we didn't do a keynote speaker this year because we did a special thing for 40th anniversary. But we normally have a keynote speaker. We've had literally rocket scientists, astronauts. We had the director of the Ames Research Center. And when we've had them, they were inspired to do what they do from having read science fiction or fantasy. So how do you, or have you even bothered to wonder about your role in terms of to society impacting society, or that's like a whatever type thing. I love writing. I'm going to just write and just, because your stories made in this book, because there's something about it, not just that it was a good story, they also fit into what our needs are, which is they're uplifting, they're PG. You don't use, gratuitous sex. There's no gratuitous violence. You're not writing for a message, but it comes out where you're feeling pretty good after reading it. And it's the first review I got from Tangent was like pretty awesome, for every story. So somebody speak to me about that. Your thoughts about that.
Well, I think it would be a great hubris if I said I was shaping the future, but I do think that the greats who write science fiction have had profound impact on society and the direction it goes, and surely with, if nothing else, with the technology that we pursue. I mean, we don't have a discussion about AI without Asimov and his laws. I mean, that's just sort of the 101. It's the framework for how we think about it and how we try to solve these problems that we're going to tackle. So I think science fiction is leadership in that area.
Right. And anybody else, any comments or?
I had one,
Yeah.
which was on a slightly different note, which is when I'm writing about the future or reading about the future, it's always nice to know who's in it, because you get a lot of stories where China's in the future, America's doing something great. But I love stories that imagine Africa in the future or the Middle East in the future. So you get the whole world is kind of in this together. So stories that come out of those regions, if there's authors listening from those regions, it's really important to hear your stories, because we want to see your future as well, what you want, what you're afraid of, all of it in its totality.
You're here.
Yeah, that's a good answer there. Anybody else any comments on that before I?
Can I say something
Yeah.
cheesy?
No, you can say something brilliant, which you normally do. So go.
Oh. So, boring story, troubled childhood, the usual. But for me, the reason why I fell in love with books in the first place is because for a moment I just felt better. So it's not ambitious, but for me, if I can do the same thing for other people, if I can write something that is just for a moment making the world okay again, that's all I want. And with regards to the future, it would be nice if I could leave a reader with the feeling that maybe regardless of what happens, the future will be happy.
Good. Right now, it's so divisive on this planet. There's so much friction. I can't just sit down and have a conversation with you. You're liberal, I'm conservative. I say, we need to conservative. You go, no, we need liberal. Right now, that's grounds for fisticuffs, instead of grounds for discussion and try, well, I don't understand that. Instead of just saying, don't, just stop being such an idiot, to actually, well, this is how I formulated this and came up with my conclusion. And then you can actually have some understanding on both parts that kind of, okay, I get that. And I think that's a value that science fiction brings to the table. So I'd like you to comment on that, how you can take issues that are happening that are so volatile, move them over here into another playing field and deal with it.
Well, I think as far as discourse is and how divisive it is, one of the intervening variables is just how we often dehumanize the other. And what writing and is to me is an exercise in empathy. So is reading, and it allows for people. What's not happening right now in discourse is listening, to try to see where the other person's coming from. What's great about reading and writing is that if you pick up a book, you're sitting and you're listening, and you can live another life. And especially if there is representation in these stories, you can see a different perspective that you might not have had before coming to that book. It's very, very valuable, and that's one reason that we need beautiful stories.
Good. Anybody else? That was a softball pitch to you guys. Come on, I got to get some more Addisons than just one.
I could jump in.
Okay, good.
What I like about real writing is you get these different perspectives. And if you're writing with empathy, like John Eric has just said, you're giving each character great reasons and a fully fleshed out rationale. I think stale writing or propagandistic writing, where they have one person's the good guy and one's the bad guy, and you know from the beginning because the bad guy speaks badly and has this stupid rhetoric. But great writing, which you find in these books and great science fiction, both characters have great things to say. They both have important parts. And even if you don't agree with one of them as an author, you still give them the best way to show what that thinking is. I don't want to write with an answer in mind, just questions. So I want everyone to be as strong as possible when they kind of jumping into narrative.
Good. Anybody else? Any? All right. The tour to author services. So there were several mini events within that overall event of coming over there. What's your take on that? Well, how was that for you? Anything that was a highlight of all those different things?
So during the tour, walking into the room with different pictures and all the books from the previous winners, I was in awe. I was humbled to think that I am in a position where some of my favorite authors were. To see my favorite author, Ray Bradbury, up in the picture, was just amazed.
Wasn't it cool in the video too?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So just, it was just a very humbling, honoring moment to be there, and to hope one day, if I could speculate myself 20, 30 years, that I may be an inspiration to somebody as these authors have been to me.
Good. Anybody else?
I was quite hoping one day to meet Dave Farland, and of course I got to the contest too late, so I missed my chance. But when I saw his picture there, it was quite moving, and I felt like a little piece of me, in a way, finally got to meet him. And so I was grateful to Author Services for unintentionally making that happen for me.
And I got to tell you too that his family, because his whole family was there last night.
They were.
Yeah, and they were so over the moon at having the multiple, acknowledgments of their father or, husband that, I mean, I never have idea what people are going to say, when they say that stuff and originate that stuff. It's pretty cool. But they were very, to use a British term, chuffed.
Likewise, Dave Farland / Wolverton was a complete hero of mine. Probably the best example of the word idol to me. And part of entering this contest also for me was a chance to meet him. And I sadly was also too late. But seeing his letter of recommendation or commendation of this workshop and reading it surrounded by all the other winners and judges was a special little moment for me.
That's good. Any other answers to that? Yeah.
So Dave being a mentor of me, I found out about this contest through him. I've taken many classes from him. I was enrolled in 318R, his very famed class when he did pass away. When I was signing books, it's a very overwhelming experience, amazing, tons of people coming by. This is last night, right? And so I asked this gentleman, who should I make it out to? And he said the Wolvertons. And I cried, got up, gave Forrest a hug, thanked them and explained to him how much their father meant to me. I would not be here if it was not for Dave. He lived and breathed the ethos of this contest to pay it forward.
Yeah,
Here.
And I hope to continue that on. But I just have such an immense gratitude for what he has done for this community, for thousands of writers. And I'm not exaggerating that number.
Not at all. You're not. He was the story doctor.
Exactly. This world, this community is a better place, a brighter place. My life has been changed because of him, and there's no way I could ever express my amount of gratitude. And the only way I can do it is to try to pay it forward like he has.
Good. He was a very dear friend, so I had my opportunity when I created his memorial video to to deal with my own sense. I was in phone call with him almost every day when he was in the hospital. I couldn't believe it. The one time I called him and said, "So Dave," because he was supposed to a few days later, he was supposed to be on the quarterly. We do these live Zooms, to the people that finish the online course. I said, "So where?" He says, "I'm in ICU." I said, "Dave, what are you doing?" He said, "Well, I see I got a call from you and I had to pick it up, and he was just so much, he said, "I think I'll have to put off the next one there." And then looked like he was starting to come out of it. And then he had that fall on the steps. But he had a lot of friends. I went to his service there. I drove up there to see it there in his home. But it's yeah, he was an amazing man. But we've got Dave, but like you've also got the other judge. Like this is Larry Niven's favorite event of the year. This is this is one of the driving things for him, the Rise of the Future workshop, the coming to the ceremony. He loves it. He's 87 now, and it's just, he loves it so much. He loves meeting people, finding people that, just kind of like, I love your known space, the different, stories that you wrote. And it's all the judges are like that, that they can know that they're able to do something, put the future there for, for science fiction and fantasy. Did you meet Lydia Van Vo? Did you see her? She's 98. She comes every year. That's A.E. Van Vo's widow. And just an amazing sweetheart. Her story is that she was General Eisenhower's translator for World War II. Just her stories are amazing. When they first time they went into Dachau and some of the places, and it was just seeing the mountains of bodies there, and just she's, even now this many years later, she still gets teary-eyed when she's, recounting that, talking about it. But she's just such a dear heart, and just this is such an important event for her, to come every year. But that's the audience that you're dealing with. For them, it's so important to come on and cheer you on, because they recognize the significance of Writers of the Future and Illustrators of the Future, what it has done for the genre. So 2 months before the workshop, I sent everybody a copy of the book to the stars, and with the idea of reading it. The artist had to read it too for an art drill that had to do. And then that was what Rob's story, that's his favorite L. Ron Hubbard story. So first of all, what was your take on that story? What was your experience on it? Because when I re-released it early 2000s, Publisher Weekly gave it a starred review, and this is 50 years after it was published, and Entertainment Weekly gave it an A-, which is the highest in that issue for any books. So what was your thought or take on that story?
Everybody's looking at me, so I guess I will take a shot at it. I mean, obviously, the story is important for the discussion of time dilation and what that would mean for humankind. But it's overlaid with sort of the human elements. There's sort of the issue of duty, and sort of we follow the protagonist's understanding of what's been done to him and what it means to have a crew and a family. And it's sort of dark and wonderful at the same time. It's also, because of the time frame in which Hubbard wrote it, it's also impressive and entertaining with the things that he successfully predicts and the things that he hasn't. And so it was a really fun read from that standpoint.
Yeah, you notice how he dealt with issues that, again, like I was saying earlier, if you try to do something right now, talking about religion or politics, it just blows up. But he did it from another perspective of the long voyage, going and coming, and just seeing that your people are gone when you come back, and the religion's changed, politics have changed, economics have changed, science has changed, and now the constant march of all those elements, which you can't talk about right now. I can't talk to you about, the rise and fall of capitalism versus socialism versus communism versus any other types of isms, because it is so electrified right now. But if you put it in that premise, you can look and go, wow,
None of it matters.
Crazy. Yeah. It's just, when you get down there, it's like, it's so like, but when you get out there, I mean, just how much when you study, if you study history, Rome, Greece, as you move forward, just even the early America, you've got your history there in Sri Lanka, Malaysia, where everything with you there, the various ownership of the different, countries and nations and loyalties and whatnot. What you see happening right now in the Middle East, so that's one thing that, I personally got out of. I was just curious for yourselves, your take on that and how that applies to the value of science fiction.
As a small side note to the stars, it's very dark, as Galen said, but also very funny. Like he's really great at having a very serious moment and then kind of undercutting it with a humorous moment. I don't want to spoil it, but I'm thinking about a scene with an older woman, and they go to see her house, and then you get the driver's perspective, and he plays that dark moment, really kind of a stomach dropping moment with a very kind of humorous moment. The two kind of go together in a very pleasing way. The way he's able to do that.
Yeah. Anybody else, Cindy?
One take that I took that was very impressed as a writer reading the story was that how math and formula was a character in the book itself, a very dispassionate, cold character, almost like a personification, and I really thoroughly enjoyed that. I listened to the audio. The production was fantastic. With singing and old sailors as well, and so it was just a really enjoyable listen.
Good.
Careful with how loud you have your volume though, because those gunshots can make you jump.
Yeah, I was constantly getting starred reviews and stuff for these audiobooks going out. I had the audiobook review editor. He was the director of audiobook reviews for Library Journal, and so he personally reviewed all the audiobooks. And he told one story how he got his next set of CDs in, which is what it was back in 2008, 2009. So he put in a CD player, put in his headphones, got a cigar, lit it up, went on his back porch to smoke and listen. And all of a sudden he said, "Oh no, it's raining." And it was the audio. He looked, and all of a sudden he was ready to go back inside and look at it. It's a blue sky. It was just such realistic sound effects that we use in our audiobooks. The Battlefield Earth one. Well, those where you have about 100,000 different sound effects that we pull from, and then we have a half a dozen actors doing it. So it's not just one voice, it's radio theater, which I'll use that now to bridge over. What'd you think of the story, the last drop in the audio theater?
That was very humorous, and it was just delivered excellently. With a lot more acting than I'd expect, physical acting for a radio production.
Yeah, these are all working actors that you have there. We're in Hollywood, of course, so they're movie actors. They've done these a lot, so they're really good at it. They just have so much fun doing them.
I'm going to be an annoying young person and say the vibes immaculate. Just everything from the way that they speak, the whole the music, it felt so vintage. It almost felt like, I mean, I've never seen a radio production in person. I've never seen someone voice acting something. So I don't know, watching it just made me feel like I was there when it was written, which was crazy to me.
Yeah. That's what I mean, that in the early 30s and 40s of the United States, 1930s and 40s, that was America's favorite form of entertainment, radio theater, and you can see why it was. It was just they bring it to life. It adds a dimension that just reading you don't otherwise get. So that's good on that. Anybody else any comments on this?
I just had one, which was that the writing came through so much. And it's written by L. Ron Hubbard and DeCamp.
Yeah.
And I almost had that mental image of them pushing each other, laughing while they're writing it. You can tell they're like, "Oh, put this in, this is too good." That came through to me, at least. That's how I imagine it.
Well, good. Yeah. They definitely had fun writing.
Exactly.
It was about story, and yeah, it's about story and story's boss.
Yeah.
So now